Momo, let's get our suspension sorted out. No, seriously, let's get our suspension sorted out. I've put 6,500 miles on this bike, adventure riding, dual sporting, riding on the road, and the only concessions I've made to the adventure part of that, as suspension-wise, have been by adding 2 turns on the preload, making it a little stiffer, and turning the rebound and compression settings in 2 clicks. Without doing that, when you have 50 pounds of luggage sitting on the back, the bike would definitely bottom out. Other than that, I haven't actually done anything at all to the suspension. And with those readjustments, the bike actually works fantastic. But as an experiment, to see if we get it to work a little bit better, I ordered a Racetech spring for the rear shock on this. This is a 6.0 kilogram per Newton meter spring. For this video, or I'm sorry, I should say for this series of videos, there's going to be 2. For the first video, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the suspension for just me as a rider in dual sport mode. And then we're going to put 50 pounds of luggage on the back, or simulate 50 pounds of luggage on the back with the stock spring and the stock suspension. And then we're going to redo it. We're going to reset sag, we're going to reset compression and rebound, mainly on the rear shock, and then ride it around again and see how close to an optimal suspension setup we can get stock for a dual sport, or for an adventure bike, sorry. Then in part 2 of this video, we're going to install the Racetech spring and do it all over again. We're going to see if with this heavier spring, if we can get this in dual sport mode and have a really good suspension setting for just me. And then we're going to add, again, 50 pounds of luggage, reset sag, compression and damping, and ride around and see if that makes a huge difference. And then see what the compromise is between the stock spring and a spring much closer to ideal for having this as an adventure bike. The very first part of part 1 is going to be your suspension. And if all of this is new to you, awesome. If none of this is new to you and you're bored to death, just scrub forward until you get to the good stuff. But we're going to real quick cover your suspension. So on your CRF450L, right, you have your front forks here, you have your rebound, and I'm going to flip this over and hope it works. You have your rebound clickers here, your compression clickers here, and then this little blue thing is actually just a valve to let the air out of the forks. So that's basically your front suspension. Your rear shock is adjusted over here. This is your high-speed compression damping, this nut on the outside. And then in the middle of that, you see that clicker? That's your low-speed compression damping. So the difference being not how fast you're going, but how fast the hit comes. So think of landing a jump versus going through whoops at slow speed. Okay, it's not how fast you're going, it's how fast your rear tire's going up and down and being hit. So that's that. And then your preload, give it a second for the camera to adjust. Your preload are these 2 collars right here. The bottom one adjusts it, the top one locks the bottom one in place. And by screwing that down, you basically raise the back end of your bike up. And then for rebound, it's going to be almost impossible to see. But there's a screw, you see it? That's your bottom, that's your rebound clicker for your rear shock. It's that guy right there. It doesn't matter which clicker you're talking about, they're all the same. Even the high-speed compression. They're all measured on the out. So when you turn them in, to the stop, that's 0. Right? So right now, and you can feel them click at every quarter turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. There we go. So that's 0. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The high-speed compression has 12, call it spots per turn, but there's no clickers. So you're just going to remember where your wrench is, right? So my wrench right now is facing this way, and I'm going to turn it all the way in. And it should be about 3.5. So there's 1 turn, there's 2 turns, there's 3 turns, oh, and a quarter. So I actually had it in a little bit. And this is position 1, right? As I turn it, position 1. As I turn it, there's a quarter turn, there's a half turn. Does that make sense? And all the clickers are the same. All these little guys here, you can actually feel it click as you turn it. And there's always a stock position. And it's always recommended anytime you're adjusting anything is that you start from somewhere, start from your stock position. It's like if you're going to go on a diet and you don't know how much you weigh now, as opposed to how much you weigh when you get to whatever your weight is, how do you know how much weight you've lost? You have no idea. Same thing, only not. So that's your suspension in a nutshell. So as a reminder, before we get into all this, I weigh about 175 pounds, probably closer to 200 when I've got all my stuff on in a backpack with some water in it, maybe a little less. When we're setting up the suspension for my bike, you have to take all that into consideration. How much I weigh with my gear and the fact that my bike is 25 pounds heavier than just a stock bike. These suspension settings may not work for you and your bike. Sag, and what is it? Right now, my back tire is off the ground, so my suspension is as low as it can possibly get. As soon as I take it off the stand and the suspension takes some of the weight, it's going to sag. It's pretty much that simple. And that first initial sag is called static sag. When I sit on the bike or when I load it up, it's going to sag some more, and that the fender is going to get closer to the tire. And that's called your race sag. In order to do all this stuff, what I did is I went to Rocky Mountain ATV and MC, or MC and ATV. And for 20 bucks, I got this little Tusk sag meter. I'm sure that's not what it's called, but that's what I'm going to call it. This is my sag meter. And basically what it does is it measures your sag from the 0 mark, which is where we're at now, all the way down to 130. So the idea behind this device, and here, let me see if you guys can see this. Stuff behind it. See how it's got graduated markings on it, and it starts at 0 at the top. So when we put this in the axle hole, this little cone, and we adjust this until 0 is somewhere where we can measure. Now, let's talk about that measurement. When your rear tire moves up and down, it does not move straight up and down, okay? It has to spin on the pivot. The pivot is right there. So your tire moves in an arc as it goes up and down. Moves like this. So I should be measuring sag somewhere along that arc. If I measure sag out here, because my turn signal is convenient, right, my measurement's going to be off because the tire is actually moving that way. In the Honda manual, they'll tell you to measure sag right to this bolt here on your seat. If you actually check it, here it is. So as my tire swings up, if my tire were to swing this far, it would actually end up behind here conveniently enough, if I lay this in here and just let it sit, it will stay right there. That's where I'm going to measure it from. So what I have a rubber band, and I'm just going to put the rubber band over the end of this thing to keep it in place. There. Now, let me move this in closer. I'm going to put the 0 mark right on that edge. Right on this edge right here. And we're going to call that 0. The Honda manual gives you some options. If you set your sag to 110 millimeters, that is considered a plush ride. So if I sit on the bike with all my stuff and it sags down to 110, right, a little over 4 inches, that's considered a plush ride. Hey, Mo. If I set it to 95 millimeters, that's considered a stiff ride. The basic idea is that you want 1/3 of your travel already soaked up by the weight of the bike. Think about if you're going along and you hit a pothole, or if you hit a drop in the road, right? If you had 0 sag in your bike, your tire would instantly come off the ground. So you need something pressing in the ground to push your tire back into those holes. In setting sag, step 1 is to get your 0 point. Now, if you don't have one of these, for 20 bucks, you can just get one. But if you don't have one, what you're going to do is you're going to take a measurement from somewhere here to somewhere up here, wherever you want it, either on that line, the bolt, doesn't matter. You're going to measure that, and it's going to come out to 24 inches. And then I would personally convert that to millimeters. But whatever, you're going to find that 24 inches, right? And then when you do your sag, when you sit on your bike, that measurement's going to get smaller. So at 0, it's 24 inches. You sit on it, and then you measure it. Somebody else measures it, and you end up with 20 inches. Your sag is 4 inches. Yay! I said never do the math. In this case, it's okay to go ahead and do the math. Step 2 is to lower the bike. I'm not super worried about this measurement, but I'm going to take it anyways because I want to see how much more the bike sags with the luggage on it. Static sag is definitely a thing. Some bikes, some tuners worry about it more than others. I am not worried about it. It's not on my radar at the moment here, but I'm still going to take it. So let's zoom in here. All right, so we drop it down onto the suspension. I've got it balanced pretty good. We're going to bounce it around a little bit. Some places will tell you to push it down and let it come up and take a measurement, in which case our measurement would be 42-ish, and then lift it up and let it settle slowly. Take that measurement, in which case our measurement would be 38, and then split the difference. Okay? What's happening is there's a little bit of stiction in the suspension that's not letting it move easily. Now you see what bouncing did? It brought it right to 40 millimeters, which is halfway between 38 and 42. So there's that to consider as well. So our static sag right now is 40 millimeters. The next step, hi Mo. The next step is to put all your gear on, grab a friend, and you're going to stand up or sit down on the bike, however you normally ride it, and you're going to check your race sag with a racer on it. Even if you're not a racer, you're a racer. I'm lazy, so what I've done is I grabbed a 10-pound weight. I've got these clothes on. We're actually kind of heavy. I got my big boots on, and I don't have anybody here at the moment to help me hold the bike up, so I'm going to cheat. I'm actually going to balance it off a rope. It's all the same thing. It'll just look funny and I'll be entertaining. So yay, entertainment. So I'm just going to put 10-pound weight on the bike and then go through all the normal sag things. Now, here's a trick. You can, for 120 bucks, you can buy an electronic meter that'll tell you how long all this is. Or if you have a GoPro on a tripod, just saying, you could put it over here, or your camera, if you could get your camera up there and take a picture of it when it's at its sag. I'm going to go with a GoPro. Okay. Get up on the bike. There we go. Bounce around a little bit. Right there. So you saw the sag was set to about 90 millimeters, which is on the stiff side. I'm okay with that, but just to show you guys how to set sag, we're going to try to set the sag to 100 millimeters, okay? So step one is to take some preload out. So to adjust the preload, we're going to use this Tusk preload adjustment tool, which is basically a really heavy, fancy bent end screwdriver and hammer. And the idea is this goes on the locking collar, on the little pins, and you just knock it loose. It's pretty much that simple. I think Motion Pro also makes one with a brass end, so it says you don't dent the preload collar or the adjustment collar, but whatever. All right, so we're going to take our tool and we want to loosen the top ring. All right, and to do that, I'm going to go around until I find the next. I know it's kind of hard to see for you guys, but maybe you can see it spinning. Oh. Maybe you can see this one. There it goes. All right, so it's your locking ring. And then back that out. There we go. Now the next thing we're going to do is back this ring out one turn. All right, 2 full turns of the preload adjuster. And let's see where we are. Oop. Butt's in the way. Trying to balance this with this rope isn't impossible, but it's a little difficult. Hang on. I got this. There we go. And that looks like 100 millimeters. So nice. Then the last thing you're going to do, if you're done with your adjustment, right, so you're going to go in and turn the locking collar down until it makes contact, then give it a couple hits to keep it in place, and then you're good to go. So the next adjustment we're going to make, we're going to put this into adventure mode, and in order to do that, I'm going to strap these 2 25-pound weights onto the bike. There we go. I had thought about actually using the Moto luggage system on here and hanging them in the pans. Problem is then we can't see this. So I think this will work. This will be fine. Keep in mind though, when you're riding around with luggage, you always want to keep the weight in the pockets. Don't put it up high back here. And that goes for any adventure rider. All your light, fluffy stuff, your sleeping bag, your puffy jacket, all that stuff goes up here. Not tool roll, not up here. Tool roll down here somewhere. Keep the weight low, and it won't affect the handling of your bike as much. If you put all the heavy stuff up here, your bike's just going to want to tip over constantly. You're going to make changes to the steering. It's going to start turning, and then it's going to try to flop over on you, and you're going to crash a lot. So keep the weight low. But for this experiment, we're just going to go with strapping these 25-pound weights, get our 50 pounds, and we'll strap them up here. We're going to readjust the sag, take it for a ride, maybe play around with some of the clickers and see what we think is the best setting with the stock setup to carry 50 pounds, 60 pounds of luggage. Okay? So we've got our 50 pounds on there. We got our 10 pounds up here. I can feel the poor spring's not happy, so as it is. But let's look at our... All right, our static sag went from 40, now it's at about 55. Oh, it's not even at 55. I totally lied to you. Okay, hang on. Let me get the bike up off the side stand and see what it droops down to. There we go. 80, a little over 80. So, and that's with no weight on it. I mean, if I stand on the peg, all right, we're well outside of our range. In fact, yeah, I don't want to bottom it out, and I can tell you from having ridden that when you put the luggage on, you definitely notice that. Just looking at this, in order to bring the 80 back up to the 40 range, and again, I'm not 100% sure that is what it's going to take. That is 40 millimeters. When I say a turn, one turn is 2, 3. So by that formula, we have to make it 20 turns on the preload in order to get this back up into some sort of range. And I don't know, can you see that? There you go. If we could count the rings below the preload, right, because we have to force it down, there needs to be 20 threads. I don't think there are 20 threads on there. In fact, looking at it from this side, I can see there's maybe 2, 4, 6, maybe 10 at the most. So we would have to crank the preload on this all the way down, which, well, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to crank it all the way down, and we'll see where it ends up at. So here's the static sag. Well, we brought it from 80 to 60-ish, give or take. Now let's see if I load this up, if I jump on it. What's the sag going to be then? Where are we at? In theory, it should work just fine. All right, I'm going to suit up. I'm going to go take this for a ride now. And we'll see what I think. All right. So So I think I've got it about as good as I'm going to get it without it being too harsh. It actually handles all right. Oh, and dear. The biggest setting change was that was nice, was the high speed. I turned to 3 turns out. All right, well, it didn't bottom out. That was good. Hey, I like it. Now, these are the best settings I've gotten to without spending an entire day out here doing this. But she's riding pretty damn good to me. So I think I'll call it good. And what you didn't see was all the times I had to come out, click, a couple clicks, click, more clicks, all right? One click at a time. And until it got pretty good. I think I like the settings right here. Now let's talk about something real quick. If you go out on a trip, right? A little bouncy. I might have to. That was my bad. What was I saying? Oh, hell, I don't know. That was fun. I'm going to stop and grab the camera so you can see me. Right, so the one thing to keep in mind is at these settings, they're pretty extreme. And the preload, I think, jacked up as far as it is. I'll pull the weights off. We'll go for one more ride. But I've got a feeling if you tried to ride this without any weight on it, so you get into camp, you pull your gear off, and everybody wants to go out for a ride, I think you're going to be kind of miserable. This time, I've got the setup is still on adventure setup, except they don't have the weights on. Yeah, it's a little stiff. And of course, the first thing you notice is you can't reach the pegs. I'm sorry. The first thing you notice is you can't reach the ground. It's tall now. Yeah. Oh, I'm feeling every little rock, every little bump. Without that weight, dampen the back end. This thing's a beast to hang on here. Having no fun. Yeah, all right, I'm happy with that. So, I'm not saying it's unrideable, obviously, I'm riding it.
but if you give it any kind of looks or something, I think you're done for. Oh, once in adventure mode, you kind of got to stay in adventure mode.
To recap what we've done today, as far as our suspension, right? We went over how you set your preload. We went over how the clickers work. We put up on the screen what the stock settings are, and then how you turn them in or out from there, and then you adjust it. I think we've discovered that you can load the bike up and have it perform pretty well off-road. Not exceptionally, but pretty well, with 50 pounds of gear way out in the back, and considering the leverage factor from the pivot point to this far back, it's a pretty substantial amount of weight. There are always those questions about the weight limit of 220 pounds. The CRF450L, which if you've watched Dad's Domain, he talks about that. I'll just go into it super briefly. This is the only bike with that weight limit, right? The 250L is like 300 some odd pounds. The KTMs are 700 pounds. The every other bike of this size has a weight limit in excess of 300 pounds. Why is the 450L 220 pounds? And all I can think of is some lawyer came up with that number. And I could be wrong. But real world, again, 6,500 miles carrying a ton of weight on this thing, and it works perfectly. Okay, back to our adventure riding. It will handle the load just fine. It's not ideal, obviously. And the biggest issue is that you have to push the preload so far down to keep the back end up. That's when it's not loaded. The bike is a beast to ride. It's also, I can just touch the ground on my tippy toes. It is really cranked up in the air if you take that weight off. So if you are on an adventure and you dump your gear at camp and decide to go tackle some trails, you'd better have your pre-compression adjustment tool and a hammer, or I guess a rock would work too, along with you, or you're just going to be hating life. The bike is just super, super stiff. Without the extra weight, every little jump you hit, and this is where the rebound and the compression really cranked up. It still wants to launch you off the bike. That spring's got so much oomph to it, it just wants to spring. So there is that limitation to doing it that way. You know, as always, I'm sure I missed all kinds of stuff. And as people ask and as I find things out, I'll put them in the comments down below. You guys with your questions or with your answers, sometimes you guys have answers that I don't have. Often you guys have answers that I don't have. Go ahead and put those in the comments down below too, and I'll just keep adding them to this video. But anyways, I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope if you were afraid of messing with your suspension, that you're not afraid of messing with your suspension anymore. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Trust me. Yeah, so that's going to be the end of video number 1. And then we're going to start video number 2, again, just to remind you, where we're going to replace the 5.1 kilogram per Newton spring that's on here now with a Race Tech 6.0 kilogram per Newton spring. And hopefully the stiffer spring won't be so stiff that when you're in dual sport mode, it's unrideable. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I think it'll actually be the right spring for this bike in its dual sport mode with all the extra doodads I've added to it, I think it'll be just fine. And I'm hoping that with that heavier spring in there, when it comes time to load the bike down, I won't have to play with the preload at all. I'll just be able to maybe change out some compression and rebound settings to get it all dialed in. So, as always, thank you guys for watching.